There comes a point when you look around and wonder, is this all there is? The routine, the habits, the distractions. We live them like they're permanent, but something in our soul whispers, you're wasting your time. I've lived that life, a life full of noise, busyness, accomplishments even, but underneath it all, a kind of spiritual rot was spreading. I knew I wasn't living deliberately. I was floating, drifting, reacting, surviving. Then I discovered Stoic philosophy, not in a classroom or a book club, but through desperation, through nights spent questioning my direction and mornings burdened by a lack of purpose. Stoicism didn't give me comforting answers, it gave me truth. And sometimes, truth stings before it sets you free. Here are 6 signs, as I've lived and learned them, that you might be wasting your life, along with the Stoic wisdom that can lead you back to purpose. 1. You chase distractions instead of facing yourself. For years I lived in a loop of constant stimulation. My phone was always in my hand, podcasts in my ears, videos on autoplay, conversations always shallow and quick. I called it being busy or informed. But really, I was just avoiding silence, because in silence, I'd have to face myself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." And yet, many of us avoid that very retreat like it's a haunted house. We scroll, we binge, we consume, because it numbs us. But what is it numbing? Our sense that we're not living as we should. I realized that if I couldn't be alone with my thoughts, I wasn't free. I was enslaved to distraction. And that's one of the first signs of a wasted life, needing something external at all times because the internal is too uncomfortable. The Stoics practiced deep solitude, not as escapism, but as a return to the center. I began turning off the noise. I walked without headphones, sat without a screen, and in that discomfort, I met myself. That was the beginning of waking up. 2. You're always busy, but rarely fulfilled. Busyness is seductive. It makes you feel important, needed, productive. But if you're honest, how much of that busyness is actually necessary, and how much of it is a cover for emptiness? Seneca said it plainly. So busy with the trivial, we let the meaningful slip by. That line shook me, because I'd built a life full of motion, but without meaning. Meetings, deadlines, errands, likes, responses, each one gave a hit of progress. But progress toward what? We often confuse activity with purpose, but the Stoics urge us to ask, what is my ultimate goal? Am I becoming more virtuous, more just, more wise? If not, all the activity is vanity. I started to cut the non-essential. I asked myself, does this task make me better or just busier? And as I removed the fluff, I found space for things that matter: reading, reflection, time with people I love, and the quiet practice of being present. A busy life isn't necessarily a meaningful one. The Stoics challenge us not to do more, but to do what truly matters. 3. You live by default, not design. There's a haunting question I came across in Epictetus. How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself? That line stopped me cold, because for too long I lived by default. I let circumstances dictate my life: job offers, social norms, other people's expectations. I waited for inspiration, for the right time, for permission. I woke up one day and realized I hadn't chosen my life, I had drifted into it. Living by default is another name for wasting your life. It means you're not the captain, you're the passenger. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, not in the sense of chasing pleasure, but in aligning with your true nature, your reason, your inner calling. And that calling won't be found on the conveyor belt of social conformity. So I started designing my life. I defined what virtue meant to me. I asked what values I wanted to embody, and every choice, small or large, was filtered through that. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but with intention. The wasted life is unexamined. The Stoic life is chosen, purposefully, relentlessly, daily. 4. You fear change more than stagnation. One of the most painful traps I fell into was staying in situations that no longer served me. Jobs, relationships, routines, simply because they were familiar. The discomfort of change felt scarier than the misery of stagnation. But the Stoics viewed change as natural. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Observe constantly that all things take place by change, and accustom yourself to consider that the nature of the universe loves nothing so much as to change the things which are and to make new things like them." If change is part of nature, then resisting it is resisting life itself. I was afraid of uncertainty, but Stoicism trained me to face it with courage, because courage is a virtue. I stopped asking, "What if I fail?" and started asking, "What if I waste the one life I've been given?" Leaving the familiar wasn't easy, but every time I chose growth over comfort, I became more alive. The more I practiced detachment from outcomes, from ego, from fear, the more I tasted freedom. You know you're wasting your life when comfort becomes your highest value. The Stoics ask us to replace comfort with courage, because only courage brings transformation. 5. You neglect your inner world. I used to think my life would change if I fixed the outer things, the job, the income, the partner, the location. But no matter how much I rearranged my circumstances, something still felt off. That's because I was neglecting the one thing that needed the most work, my character. Epictetus put it simply, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. I realized that I didn't have a clear sense of who I wanted to be. I had goals, but no vision of virtue. I wanted success, but hadn't defined integrity. I was chasing achievement, but not wisdom. Neglecting your soul, your character, your principles is perhaps the most tragic way to waste a life, because everything external can be taken from you, but your mind, your values, your actions, that's yours. So I began doing the hard work, journaling, meditating on virtue, examining my reactions, questioning my motives, holding myself to the fire, not to be perfect, but to be honest. The Stoics didn't care about appearances, they cared about excellence of soul. And once I made that my priority, life became less about winning and more about being worthy. 6. You postpone the present for an imagined future. I used to say things like, "I'll start when things calm down," or "When I retire, I'll finally live." But those days never came. There was always something. And worst of all, I treated the present like a waiting room for the real life to begin. Seneca called this out 2,000 years ago. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. The greatest waste of life is postponement. We delay joy, purpose, hard decisions, and healing for a tomorrow that may never arrive. Meanwhile, this day, which could be our last, is spent on autopilot. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of mortality. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That phrase, memento mori, isn't meant to depress us. It's meant to awaken us. I started living like each day mattered, not in a frantic or desperate way, but with mindfulness. I said no to things that didn't align with my soul. I said yes to small joys, honest work, and meaningful rest. Life doesn't begin later, it begins now. And wasting the present for an imaginary future is the silent killer of purpose. All 6 of these signs point to one root: unconsciousness. A life wasted is a life unexamined, unchosen, unguarded. But Stoicism is the antidote. It calls us back to awareness, discipline, virtue, and above all, choice. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have been made a citizen of the world by birth and reason. Why do you remain in darkness when you were born for light?" You were not born to scroll endlessly, to chase approval, to stay stuck, or to drift. You were born to live, with clarity, with virtue, with purpose. The Stoics don't promise ease, they promise freedom, and it begins the moment you stop wasting your life. So today, ask yourself, am I distracting myself or developing myself? Am I filling time or fulfilling purpose? Am I surviving or truly living? The clock is ticking, and as the Stoics remind us, you already have what you need, your reason, your will, your soul. Use it. Live deliberately. Choose wisely. Waste nothing.